Hi, everyone, and welcome to our October edition of Show and Tell. Um, as if you've joined or if you haven't joined our past several sessions, you'll notice our slight shift in format. It's going to be a little bit more topic driven and discussion based, but we have a very exciting topic for today. But before that, I'll hand it over to Ash to do a little bit of housekeeping. First of all, also, we do love hearing your questions and feedback, so everything will be shared. Feel free to jump in while during today's discussion, use the chat box. Do make sure that it's hit to everyone, so not just the host and panelists can see, but all of the attendees. And then now I'll hand it over to Ash to tell you about some upcoming events.
Thanks, Hallie. Hi, everyone. Yeah, we have a few exciting events coming up over the next few weeks. So, first of all, for our clients, we have Colour Week next week, where we celebrate all things colour. But available to clients and non-clients, we have a live webinar on Thursday next week, so on October the 9th, which is our Fall Winter 27-28 Must-Have Colours webinar, which is always one of our most celebrated webinars. So please do join us for that if you can. Then on October the 15th, we have our Spring Summer 26 Women's Fashion Week wrap up webinar. So please join us for that if you can. And then lastly, I wanted to mention that we have another live webinar where we dive into active creation in the age of AI. So this is actually to support an upcoming white paper that we have that will be launching that same week, which we're really excited about. We'll dive into topics such as how to regain an active creative role in the age of AI. So a really exciting and important one there. You can see the links to all of these in the resources tab, or you can also go to futuresnoops.com/events. Lastly, we don't have any visuals for this, but kind of hot off the press, we're doing 3 in-person events, which we love doing, in November and December. So we will be in London on the 11th of November. And we will be diving into active creation in the age of AI, and also be running a color immersion workshop there as well. And then we'll be running the same event in New York on the 2nd of December. And then we will also be taking that to Barcelona in November as well. So the London event registrations are live. So we're going to pop the link in the chat. If you're in London, please do come and see us. And we will be making the registration live for Barcelona and New York next week. So look out for our invitations there. And that's all I wanted to say. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Thank you, Ash. So, as I mentioned, kind of diving into what our topic for this month is going to be for October, I thought it would be the perfect time to talk about all things Fashion Week. So, as Ash mentioned, that in a few weeks, the team will be hosting a webinar to dive deeper into the analysis for the entirety of the Spring Summer 26 runways. But for the purpose of today, we wanted to not only give a little bit of a preview, but also just kind of share some additional findings and inspiration from some of our team members. So we have members from our men's, youth, and accessories team here today, who they can introduce themselves. But I'll start kind of by asking the first question, and I'll kick this over to the youth team. But who are some of the most exciting or emerging designers in your market that you've seen so far this season? If I don't know if Peter or Maria, one of you wants to kick it off, but and also feel free to direct me of where to drive on this Miro board.
I can kick it off. If you can scroll a little bit down. So this designer, I don't think she's necessarily super new. It's on the left-hand side. Her name is quite long. It's Zoe Gustavia Anna Wallen. So this is her third season presenting for New York, but she's been getting a lot of praise and attention. This is the lookbook that she presented for Spring Summer 26. I think it's amazing. Her point of view is very much directed towards like this Victorian era. So it's almost costumey, but in a way it feels really applicable for today. Um, she's not really, she works in Brooklyn. She does everything handmade. So I don't think she's really like mass producing any pieces. She has been like, her pieces have been styled on some celebrities, but nothing too She's not really out there yet. I think her career is just like kicking off, but I think she's definitely one to keep an eye out. Like, I love every piece there. It looks so sculpted and also like body morphing. So it has this kind of like, I don't know, structured appeal to it. So that's one that came up on my radar.
Yeah, I really love the draping. It's very cool.
So good. I'm so keen to explore this designer more. I feel like I'll be rushing to Instagram to follow them as soon as this webinar wraps. But I feel like for the youth market specifically, this has been a really exciting season, especially considering everything that's been happening at London Fashion Week, which has been the highlight of my fashion month so far. I am maybe biased because I do live here in London, but they've just appointed a new CEO for the British Fashion Council, which has kind of shifted things in the way that London Fashion Week is set up. There's more of a key focus on supporting emerging talent. One thing that they've done is they've completely, well, temporarily waived the entry fees at London Fashion Week. So we've got a naturally busier schedule. And there's three labels that I wanted to mention today. The first one is this adaptive label Unhidden, which should be on the mirror board here. They showed during London Fashion Week, which is huge. They're the only adaptive fashion brand to become a member of the British Fashion Council. And they have this amazing mission to create equity for the disabled and chronic sick communities. Great to see them as an addition to London Fashion Week. And then Mithridate is noteworthy as well. They are returning for their second collection under the creative direction of Daniel Fletcher, who was previously at Fiorucci, who I believe like really understands how to attain that kind of younger consumer base. What I loved about the collection is it was kind of this push and pull of elements of kind of London streetwear balanced with codes of that kind of countryside living uniform, which felt very innately British. So think like rugby shirts and Harrington jackets, the full works there. And then if we scroll down a little bit, there should be Dilara Fingdikoglu, who was a standout voice, definitely in London. I'm sure you've all seen, but there's a lot of kind of comparison happening online. People are comparing her to the late Alexander McQueen. And what she's doing is definitely worth tuning in for. It was a great show. Naomi Campbell walked the show. Vivienne Westwood's granddaughter attended. And it was really interesting as well. Anyone that couldn't get into the actual show, they had an invitation to a free watch night in a pub nearby that was thrown by the British Fashion Council, which is really interesting. So lots of emerging voices and cool happenings in London for sure.
I love that. I can kick it over if the accessories team has any emerging designers they want to speak to, or
Yeah, if you zoom in on Pauline Dujancourt, there's a lot going on here. This one right there. So she is semi-new. I think she started in maybe 2022. She graduated from Central St. Martin's, but we'll kind of get into our whole kind of where me and Charlotte were coming from for like all of our polls for this runway webinar. But we really are loving like her fabric manipulation and how ethereal it is. Even though this is just, ready to wear fashion week, her workmanship is like nearly couture level. And she uses these really intricate textile processes, which like from afar, it kind of just looks like it's like tattered and torn. But when you look at it closely, it's really amazing what she kind of combines together to kind of create these shapes. And that goes for her clothes as well, not just her accessories. So yeah, this is one that we're definitely looking at.
yeah, that's so stunning.
If you want to go up a little bit, we can look at the Nike x Susan Fang collaboration underneath Girlified Corpcore. Which again, we can dive deeper into the theme as a whole. But if you want to click on the Nike image, there's some really awesome imagery, but we wanted to highlight, yeah, that one. We wanted to highlight Susan Fang. She's been on the scene for a little bit at this point, but they just released a new collaboration with Nike under the Women's Artist collection, which debuts limited run silhouettes designed by female artists. And this was showcased on the London runways. So this capsule is titled Force of Nature. color and features Susan's signature hand beaded details and these really beautiful airy pastels on two different Nike silhouettes, which are the V2K Run and the classic Dunk Low. So this official press release says that nature inspires the collection's designs, translating flowing water and refracted light and blooming flowers into a visual language that celebrates women's strength. So always great to see, these established brands like Nike spotlighting these up and coming innovative female designers like Susan Fang.
Wow, these images are so stunning.
They're gorgeous.
I also feel like this is kind of like, I know you're going to talk to it, but just kind of the evolution of these more like gorpcore and active styles is super interesting.
Absolutely.
I guess we can kind of actually transition there, unless Michael, if you have anything to add for menswear. I know that the men's fashion weeks kind of happened a few months ago. They're still happening in some cities, but if there's any designers, and then we can kind of come back to some emerging trends that we're seeing.
Yeah, definitely. Just like off the bat, I added quickly to the left, even further. There's yeah, that teeny little link. There's Savan Apparel. I think that should take you just the collection. Um, I'm a little biased because I've actually had the pleasure of meeting Jack at a couple trade shows and stuff, but he's an upcoming New York artist and he got to show for New York Fashion Week. And I'll talk more about it with the overarching themes and my topic today as far as runway goes and stuff like that. But it just feels very authentic. It feels very heritage driven. And it's an interesting take on it's almost like contemporary tradition, right? Like new trad, this whole sort of thing, but it feels very, very rustic at the same time. I don't know, it just feels very tasteful. I think he's got a real knack for tailoring. That's where he started out, working, doing some suit tailoring and stuff like that for some other designers. But it was really cool to see him really make it and break out in New York Fashion Week this time around. And yeah, again, with the diverse models and apparel tailored specifically to them is super cool to see too. But yeah, in addition to Savan apparel, like you mentioned, Hallie, men's, we've sort of been uh, on the roll now since about June, but I wanted to call out Soshiosuki, who we have a little hot now. We have a little runway watch on the site for our clients that has some more detail, but they recently won the 2025 LVMH prize, and rightfully so. I mean, I would really encourage everyone to check out the rest of their collection, but I just think they're doing tailoring and this sort of everyday uniform way better. They're ahead of the curve on a lot of things. They're doing it way better than anyone else, in my opinion. They have such a fresh perspective, and I think it's really cool to spotlight some Asian designers as well. As someone who's always been wanting to break out into like Tokyo Design Week and stuff a little more. I know we have our big dogs out in Paris and Milan, but um, this has been a really cool brand to watch sort of blow up over the last couple of months. A lot of people have uh, been put onto them since that LVMH prize, but I would definitely encourage people to check them out as well as an up and comer at least. But yeah.
Yeah, this is so great. I love all the neckwear detail. I don't know if it's actually like integrated into the shirting, but that's
Mhm.
so cool.
Definitely. It's like a really cool blend between like, this corporate Japan 80s power suit dynamic with a modern take with it that's very movement inspired. It's very flowy. You can tell that the patterns and stuff on the suits are much lighter. But yeah, it's really, really neat to see.
Yeah. I love that. I think that jumping kind of into the next question, obviously we'll get way more in depth in this, I'm sure, in the next few weeks in the webinar, but are there any emerging trends? I'll kick it back over to the accessories team because I feel like you have so much really interesting kind of themes and trends that you've started or seeing. So if you want to jump into that, we'll kind of kick it around.
Yeah, so I can keep going with our kind of girlified Gorpcore, which we first saw with the Susan Fang X Nike collaboration. But if you want to go over to the next one, which is a collaboration from Merrell and streetwear brand Lonely Ghost, they released an iteration of Merrell's Moab Speed 2 sneaker alongside some apparel silhouettes. So the sneaker comes in two different colorways, but the real kicker is that each pair comes with a customization kit, including pearl beaded laces and pink satin bows and silver charms and more to create this completely unique pair of hiking shoes. And the co-founder of Lonely Ghost says that this collection isn't just about product, it's about self-expression and connection and showing up fully as yourself, which I love. Even in the imagery, they show these really girly hiking shoes on like male models, which I think is awesome. And these were debuted in New York, and definitely mirrors a lot of what we've been seeing recently at trade shows as well as within retail. Things like bag charms and sort of DIY inspired elements are definitely here to stay. And then over on the right, Simone Roca and Crocs debuted in London. Simone Roca continues the collaboration with Crocs, this time transforming the signature rubber clog into a platform ballerina silhouette, featuring embossed bows along the soles and pearl and crystal trims. And according to Harper's Bazaar, they said every well-dressed person loved this ugly shoe at London Fashion Week. So there's definitely something to be said about kind of these merging traditionally ugly shoes like the Croc or the dad sneaker with these like really super girly aesthetics. And just to round it out, Solomon recently launched the Satin collection, which crafts three of the outdoor brand's signature styles in ballet-inspired colors and satin, and including details like delicate mesh paneling and, of course, bows. And Solomon says the silhouettes aim to prove that strength and softness can effortlessly coexist, which I'm obsessed with that, and I want a pair of these so bad.
I was gonna say, I was like, I need these.
And then if you keep going over to the right, we just included a sneak peek at one of our Spring Summer 27 product shifts, which is titled Play Gaze. And this is heavily inspired by this sort of girlification movement, merging these delicate, playful, and almost edible detailing with these kind of active leaning silhouettes and resulting in this kind of explosion of like sensorial design. So just wanted to give a little sneak peek at that one, as it's one that we're really excited for. I think Amelia has a couple of call outs that also go
Yeah.
along with this.
As I
Yeah.
scroll down, I was just gonna say that this reminds me kind of, and hopefully I'm not stealing Amelia's thunder, but like how everyone is like accessorizing their bags right now. I feel like it's moving to the footwear, which is really, really fun.
Yeah, no, totally. I feel like accessories in general right now are kind of like blowing up like crazy. Like your bag is accessorized and then the accessories are accessorized and like it's just like your charms have a charm. It's crazy. Um but just like piggybacking off of Charlotte's point, I definitely think like just in like accessories in general, there's this move towards like girlhood and this kind of like very kitschy escapism that I think we have seen for a few seasons, but it's kind of getting more and more crazy because I feel like as trends kind of reach their peak, they go extravagant and then they kind of dip. So I think we're kind of getting to that super high point right now. But interestingly, I pulled a lot from mainly London Fashion Week just because, like Peter is saying, I think there's like so much coolness coming out of there, especially with all the changes that are happening. But also they are tend to be just a lot more innovation and like kind of subversive spirit there than maybe some other cities. But so I feel like it makes it a really good backdrop for this trend. But I've noticed that multiple designers like that I am using here all quoted like utopia or fantasy when describing their collections, which I found really interesting that like they're all kind of coming from this place of like escapism and like imagining like a different world that their collections kind of live in. And so bringing us to Ashley Williams. So these are my two favorite accessories from the collection, but they have a really amazing variety of accessories. So they kind of are using these like collaging techniques to make shoes and bags and like with all these like it's kind of like um it reminds me of those books where you're kind of like trying to find the
Oh yeah, the junk journals.
yes, yeah. So yeah, they're really amazing, but it all is kind of these very like intimate, personal aspects of like girlhood and womanhood and kind of like using that as like a motif, like a tangible motif on their bags is really beautiful. But the whole collection is coming from this like imagining a utopian, idyllic landscape of things that are kind of mundane, like they included like nurses' uniforms and nightgowns and like house dresses, but kind of in this very Ashley Williams like surrealist way. Um, kind of giving like a girl dressing up, you know, in her playroom or whatever. And then moving to Sandy Liang, she also kind of sticking with her, you know, very classic aesthetic, but she specifically was quoting like a dollhouse fantasy. So she was very inspired by her childhood and like Tamagotchi and just like growing up in like restaurants and like playing games while you're just like sitting at the table. Um and so she really fuses nostalgia, fantasy, and surrealism. And I feel like surrealism is like really key in what's making this kind of new now. So I feel like a lot of designers I'm seeing are doing these kind of like you're not really sure what you're looking at. Like that skirt is kind of like, you know, curtains or like a window pane, and the shoe is or the bag is a shoe. It's like kind of all these weird kind of reminds me of like Schiaparelli in a way. But in this very like kind of childlike, fantastical way. And then I just already talked about Pauline Dujoncourt, so I can kind of skip over her, but I feel like this is a more like mature, kind of upscale version of it. Um, I mean, kind of showing that like you don't need to just do like plastics and, you know, more simple materials to kind of get your point across in this way. If you go down, I think there's Bora Aksu right there. Yeah, so they also were inspired by specifically the designer's vintage doll archive, which I know that picture is like kind of creepy, but I feel like it's like a really interesting backstory behind their collection. So they're kind of the designers said they were inspired by their broken dolls in their collection. I mean, kind of seeing the beauty in brokenness and taking that as like a starting point for their collection. So a lot of their pieces, they use like tulle, lace, and taffeta as kind of what they called reconstructing tools. So viewing it as like mending and using like lace trims and ruffles as glue. So it's kind of supposed to like mimic like a porcelain doll being repaired or something like that. So it's really interesting also to see like they called it romantic resistance, and a lot of the videos from the runway shows all use like loud rock music and stuff. So kind of these, you know, that the opposition between like these like girly quote unquote um pieces and then this really loud like in your face music is really interesting. So yeah, and I think we touched a bit on Susan Fang, so I won't get into that, but she also talks about future utopia in her collection as well. So kind of interesting, like the vocabulary they're using and the inspiration. Everyone is like collectively coming from a similar place. It's kind of cool to see.
Yeah, I love all the different, interpretations of utopia because I feel like that's a word that you have. I feel like everyone kind of has a different idea of what that looks like. So I love that this has been kind of like where people are headed with that. It's really, really interesting.
Yeah.
So I'll kick the same question over to the youth team if there's any emerging trends or anything that you wanted to um, pop up. I think I'm going to go here just because I feel like it kind of
Yeah.
relates to the doll theme.
Yes, I was totally on the same wavelength with Amelia and Charlotte. So I was seeing a lot of this doll theme come through, but it seems grittier. It's seeming less pretty and less kind of like cutesy. It has a bit more of a grit to it. So I called it ragdoll because ragdolls are usually like, in my vision, a little bit beat up. So it's pieced together. I really like this sort of layering of like lingerie and pajama pieces into like sportier, um, baggy bottoms. So it feels like it's really being reinvented, and it looks almost like a really cute punk, or it has something about it that's a bit more like juvenile. And again, really tying into those themes of girlhood. Girlhood has been popping up for quite a few seasons. So I think there's this like wanting to reclaim our innocence back. And you're seeing it so much in clothing. So I definitely came across that girlhood theme.
Yeah,
And
I was just going to jump in and say I think the Louis Vuitton collection, which didn't picture, also kind of reminds me of a more like adult grown-up version of this too, with all like the ruffles and the prints.
yes, it's really like going back to when we used to play with our dolls, like no rules. It's all about the sweetness, but really chaotic at the same time.
Yeah.
And then another theme that I kept seeing, I feel this is really coming from the last few seasons where we saw a lot of this like Joan of Arc inspiration, but now I'm seeing it pivot into this more space of like mysticism. So a lot of these kind of like charmed looking necklaces or like heavy metal, but it's looking less like armor and more like spiritual, kind of like maybe like a monastery kind of aesthetic to it. So I saw a lot of that, but again, I'm seeing it less pretty and more like street ready. Like it's almost like streetwear meets evening wear, but somehow it's very mystical. So I saw a lot of that coming through. And I think again, it has a lot to do with escapism, fantasy, and even like that folklore feeling feels very childhood rooted, because that's the only sort of time in our lives where we were really, falling into these storybook fairy tales. So I think again, you see a lot of this crossover of like childhood feelings and childhood joys and memories and nostalgia. So that was another trend that I kept seeing pop up throughout all Fashion Week.
Yeah, super cool. I love the medieval kind of thread that we've seen pulled through for the past several seasons. Then we've talked a lot about it in our forecast, from DAs all the way down to like individual stories, but I like continuing it in that like grungier kind of way that feels a little bit more wearable, a little bit more approachable. Super cool. And
I
then,
just have a couple of things to add
oh yeah,
here.
of course.
I mean, as someone that definitely has a phobia of anything doll-like, I'm just gonna shift gears here for a second. I feel like every season I love to look at some of the emerging designers and what they're doing, but actually this season, some of these like huge heritage houses have been really interesting to look at. I've been loving Trendspotting at the Burberry show, which I think I dropped in some images from that show there. But it was really interesting because you could really tell that Burberry is really trying to tap into that younger consumer base. So actually the trends that Gen Z are setting online, we were seeing on the runway, which is kind of meta in a way. But the collection was definitely more younger leaning than we've seen Burberry be before. It was inspired by music, specifically live music, and the festival scene that is so prominent in the UK, from Glastonbury to these like smaller regional festivals. But it's interesting because you got all of these really gorgeous like archival silhouettes and details that were kind of recontextualized under this aesthetic that leaned a bit younger. So if you think of like any of those Gen Z kind of hero key items, like the workwear jacket or like the micro mini skirt or like the skinny scarf, like all of those things that are really kind of embedded in like youth culture, specifically to Gen Z, we saw in like a luxe interpretation on the runway. So I think it's definitely a fun show to look at if you're kind of needing guidance on where kind of key items are shifting. So that was a great show, honestly. I was really surprised by everything happening at Burberry.
I
Yeah.
don't want to interrupt, but also Peter, like it's a really interesting point that you mentioned, like, some of these heritage brands playing into the Gen Z card a little bit. I don't know if anyone else saw, it was a couple hours ago only, Dior, Jonathan Anderson's Dior women's wear debut. Maybe not, I don't have it linked because it literally, oh, perfect.
I
That's
literally
so
popped it
great.
in right before.
Yeah, sweet, sweet. I was gonna say it's still definitely a little more contemporary than maybe that Burberry show, but I think they're really playing into some more Gen Z. I like that you call them hero key items. I was gonna say for Dior, it seems like he kind of played into some hero like details or design silhouettes. Like he has some archival influence in there with the really, really like the crazy volume, the wide stuff, but it's also just very like the image on the left with that the denim shirt and like that little skirt. Like I feel like that's a lot younger leaning compared to some of the archival looking things he's featured as well. I just think it's really cool to see these like all new creative directors and stuff play their hand and see what's going on compared to these really, I won't say stuffy because they're legends for a reason, but these brands that might have been stagnant for a while, especially in heritage.
It's
Yeah.
actually really interesting how like internet coded these pieces are as well. Like it really
Exactly,
reminds me
that's a really
of
good word. Yeah.
like a few seasons ago when like Balenciaga would look at what skaters are doing on the streets and kind of interpreting that in like a luxury way. But now it feels like brands are looking for like the girlies on TikTok and Instagram and what they're doing and doing their interpretations, which is like really fun. But yeah, I love that Dior show.
Yeah, I'm excited to dive in. It was like the first post on my feed right before coming into this meeting. So I was like, let me just quickly pop everything in here. I feel like, yeah, if you want to have anything to add from the men's perspective, Michael.
Yeah, sure. I mean, just to get some stuff out of the way, I featured here as well. This is from, previous seasons, but Sakai and Carhartt Whip, they showed this collection. Everyone loved it. It was great. I just wanted to, put it on people's radars. It's being officially released, I think, yeah, in like 2 days online, just in case anyone saw that. Because I remember watching it and like, reviewing it for work last year and stuff like that. I was like, oh, like this is sick. I would actually maybe buy some of that stuff one day. So that's cool to put out. And then also, I guess speaking to that, like internet coded collections and stuff like that, Demna's debut at Gucci. I just linked like the Hypebeast article, but speaking of internet coded, I've really been noticing people going crazy about the Horsebit jeans. I don't know if you guys have seen those too. But they're really just like classic straight leg jeans. They're in a darker dye, like an indigo denim looking thing. Yeah, yeah, right there. But they just feature, that signature Gucci horsebit loafer, horsebit bit. I keep saying bit, on the pockets instead. But yeah, it's just a much fresher take for Gucci, and it's very internet coded as well, as Peter mentioned. But yeah, I think that's as far as my like radar stuff goes. I have a overarching theme about authenticity as well, but I don't know if we want to get into that just yet.
Yeah, I was just going to mention because I think that something that marked this kind of fashion month was just the turnover for new creative directors at so many shows. I feel like it's built up a lot of anticipation. I did want to put in Louise Trotter's Bottega because I'm obviously obsessed with it, like the
Insane.
fiberglass um, sweaters they called them, which I can't imagine that they're comfortable, but they're so cool. A new way to do animal, like it feels like there's so much movement and wildness, but obviously the construction and the craft is still impeccable. The colors I thought were incredible, but that was one of my favorites from it was one of my most anticipated and then turned into still one of my favorites for the season so far. I do want to switch gears a little bit, kind of for our last topic, possibly, because I think that there's a lot of richness in here. But I feel like we kind of talked about the changes that were made, but I feel like a lot of it was a lot more experiential. I think that as we've seen kind of the rise of, again, like this new online and social integration into Fashion Week, of course, because of COVID, but also just because of the era that we live in, we need to make changes and make it a little bit more accessible for people. And I feel like there's been so many cool experiences and things that have popped up and just new ways to present people's collections and brands' collections for this season. So I do want to talk a little bit about that. I have some links too, but I know, Peter, since you are in London, you went to a lot of events. So if you want to talk about anything that you saw that you thought was really interesting.
Yeah, it's certainly been a busy month. I mean, something that jumps to mind is eBay's Endless Runway, which has been really interesting. They've been kind of trialing, having a presence during Fashion Month, but it feels like this season they were really in like full force, kind of going for it. Their initiative actually is spanning like the core four, so like London, Paris, New York, Milan, and they basically staged a shoppable catwalk with all pre-loved items. So they had this huge focus on exclusive archival designer pieces. It was all for the London edition. It was curated by their pre-loved style director, Amy Bannerman. And it was a really interesting show. And even just like seeing the front row and who attended, it was really kind of taken seriously, alongside some of the major shows, which was really interesting. And in London, it was hosted by Amelia de Moldenberg, who is an internet personality and presenter who you might know from her red carpet interviews, as well as her famous YouTube show, Chicken Shop Date. And even just like choosing her to kind of endorse their initiative in pushing for kind of circularity within the fashion landscape, it just felt very relevant and again, very internet coded, not to overuse the term, but that's definitely one that's worth mentioning. And then it's been the season of anniversaries, it feels. I feel like on social media, I've seen more coverage of like the events surrounding Fashion Week than like the actual main looks from the main shows. We had 10 years of Harris Reed, which I believe I dropped in some images for that, which should be somewhere there, really kind of innovating demi couture and celebrating fluidity, which is crazy to think that there's been like 10 years of that already. And then we've also had 15 years of David Coma, and they had a huge event in Soho, super star-studded, and it was just really great to kind of this season see some of the new season looks off the runway so early and on these celebrities. So definitely lots happening in and around Fashion Week here in London.
Yeah. I don't know if there's anything else to add. I was gonna I popped in a couple of links up here, just some interesting examples I saw of how people are changing the way that they're showcasing. One of my favorite examples was from Tolu Coker, who's a British Nigerian designer. And instead of doing a traditional runway show, she actually created a short film. So she had a presentation, the models were still there in the clothing, but it was a screening of this short film that featured Naomi Campbell. I do want to watch just a little bit of it. It's not the full film, so it's just a preview, but it's so stunning. And I just love this way to I think Michael mentioned in the chat that like they're doing, I feel like people are really into kind of this world building in a new way. Let's see if I can click into the link. But I think that do it this way. I think like there's this new way of kind of being really immersive in the storytelling and showing the clothes in a new way is so stunning. So I'll play a little bit of this before we move on to other examples.
I'm just a mum. That's how I think of myself today. You know, this is a special moment. Legacy, it's memories, it's nostalgic for me. Tradition. Well, those who know me know that I have a childlike way about me. Those who know me also know that I'm shy. But those who know me know more than anything in the world is what I wanted to be was a mother. With my kids, I am fun, but I'm measured in the sense of discipline, the moral standard of how I was raised in a West Indian, Jamaican household. I find myself saying things that my grandmother would say to me.
Like I'll pause it there, but just wanted to share because I think that of course the clothing still looks so impeccable and beautiful. It's a 15-minute film, so it's like actually a narrative. It's called Unfinished Business, and it's really inspired by Naomi Campbell's story. So I just think that it's just a really interesting way to show that. And also, I didn't put any pictures here, but Rachel Antonoff and Susan Alexandra, they posted their second annual Best in Show runway show, quote unquote runway show, where they teamed up with Animal Haven, which is a nonprofit adoption agency for dogs and pets in New York. So the models carry the dogs on the runway. They were all up for adoption. So I just love the way of kind of integrating new ways to showcase the clothing.
I think it's
So I
really
don't,
neat too. I mean, Peter was talking about, the events you attended in London and how you're showing us this really cool film, how brands are getting really creative with showing their own collections and stuff. I think it's also been neat watching like us or like the viewers, the consumers find new ways to get into this stuff too. I don't have a link, but it just reminded me. I don't know if anyone follows. I think his name is Elias on Instagram, but he's been like a fashion influencer, we'll say, for a while, but he's also started this thing called Watch Party, where it's basically just like, he'll host runway watch parties basically, and it becomes like, I don't know, like people watching the Super Bowl or something. You get together, you watch a big event, but it's really created like this unique social gathering style thing for runways, which has been popping off on Instagram and stuff like that lately. I think that's cool to see, like the
no,
other side of it.
I really love that idea because I feel like that's been kind of an issue over the past, probably I would say decade, maybe even more, where because of social media, like everyone has access to the shows, obviously, which I think is great. And some ways, but I think it's made it feel a little bit less special because I feel like it used to be like, oh, like I would like literally refresh like websites just to make sure, just to see when the show would come up, but it would take a lot longer than again immediately seeing it on my phone on Instagram from everybody. So I think that being able to like still create an occasion around Fashion Week and Fashion Month and these shows, I think is a really unique way to get people more involved, as you said. So I don't know
Absolutely.
if
And
there's any.
just seeing, oh,
Oh,
sorry.
go
I was
ahead.
just
Go
gonna
ahead.
say, and like seeing the looks and movement as well, and like getting a sense for the atmosphere. It makes such a difference from just seeing the flat JPEG. It's been so nice to see like film being kind of used more and more to like tease and showcase collections. Like I think even Demna's Gucci, they had like a film that was kind of introducing this new era. So definitely a fun time to be a fashion and a film buff for sure.
For sure.
I
Yeah.
was gonna add because Diesel did something so cool this year. I mean, I think it was quite cool, but I'm curious to know what you guys think. They did an egg hunt, so they had these models encased in these plastic eggs. I don't know how they didn't get claustrophobia and freak out, but they were scattered all over the city. And on each egg, they had like a barcode. So you would scan the barcode and it would tell you where to go. And whoever got to the full collection first would win an entire look from the runway. So I can totally see this as being like a very open, inclusive, fun way to have your audience interact with your collection that doesn't feel like, hidden and exclusive. So I liked that. I thought it was really cool. What do you guys think?
It's like Pokemon Go, but for fashion.
I think it's fun, and I
I
think
kind of love it.
it's on brand for Diesel because they are fun. They are out of the box. They can't take themselves too seriously because then it takes away from their aesthetic. So I think it really matched their brand really well.
Yeah, I think it's fun. And I think again, just to gamify the experience of it and just like make it feel like you're a part of it, I think that's really fun. Yeah, I don't know if there's any other outstanding. I was gonna pause and pose one last question before we wrap up in a few minutes, but obviously Paris is going on right now. It's still going on. Does anyone have any shows that they're really anticipating or excited to see? Or any final thoughts about Fashion Month?
For accessories, I was definitely really excited for Jonathan Anderson for Dior, of course, and all of the other big houses that will be showing in Paris. But I know for us on the accessories team, we love the smaller designers as well. So like Cecily Banson, which we anticipate will definitely fall in line with our kind of girly gorpcore thing that we've been seeing. Michael mentioned Sacai. They always have really awesome kind of minimal almost brutalist type accessories. Always excited to see those. Kiko Kostin, I always butcher his last name, but you guys know who I'm talking about.
Kiko Kostadinov.
Yeah.
So good, so good.
But always love to see kind of the interesting mix of colors, especially on like footwear. So I'm personally excited for those.
I'm really excited to catch up with the Courage show. I feel like it's a label that just has my whole heart. And they're definitely gaining more and more popularity for their like clean sophistication. I feel like there's a lot more buzz around them every time like Fashion Month happens. So I'm keen to catch up and see what they're up to.
Yeah, I've seen some of the images and it looks really cool. I also saw this as unrelated, it's a different brand, but Coperni is launching like a skincare or something. They said it's like fashion for your skin. I feel like I've been seeing so much of like about the teasing of that. So again, just kind of integrating these different product categories into Fashion Week and kind of using it as a launch pad for these external things, I think has been exciting. Any other closing thoughts? Yeah, well, thank you all so much for attending. Thank you to the amazing panelists. Um, if you want more of this fashion goodness, you'll have the webinar on October 15th, I believe, but this was really fun. I think it's a good just kind of get a peek into it and kind of also behind the scenes into all of the research and analysis that we've been doing for this month. So thanks to everyone for joining, and we'll see you all next month.